The category is What the Trans, darling?
Hello, and welcome to What the Trans.
What the Trans?
What the Trans, indeed. Ashley, I don't know about you, but I'm over this. I'm over the pandemic.
Yeah, like, can it stop now, please? Because we've said, like, that's enough now. All right, stop it off.
Yeah, it was very exciting at first, world changing, but now it's just like day a million, and our boiler's broken. So at the worst fucking time, so there's no hot showers or anything, and I'm just over it. I'm here, and I'm stinking in my room, and it's not great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Dealing with everything as best I can. The annoying thing is that, as has been mentioned in a couple of other places before, is that obviously, even though there's a pandemic on, people don't actually stop being ill and needing to go to hospital and have doctor's appointments and stuff for other things. And unfortunately, I am dealing with one of those things right now, and it's something that's been going on for a while, causes me a certain amount of discomfort and pain, and I can't do anything about it at this very moment because I can't go to my doctors and everything's geared to deal with coronavirus, which I understand. I get it. I absolutely do. That's the priority. But it's also like, oh, God damn it. So,
Yeah, and that is partially why you sound a little bit different, because you were unable to get to your mic because of these issues. So apologies, listeners, if Ashley sounds a little bit different.
Yes.
But we're making do with a shitty situation here, like
indeed.
Everyone is.
Yes, we have slightly less recording technology at our disposal simply because of our respective placements. But we'll be back to nice, shiny, lovely microphone soundingness by the time we get to our next episode. So,
shall we do some terrible news, which I really didn't want to fucking do?
I don't think either of us did, yes. So, however, even though there's a pandemic on, certain people just haven't stopped, and so it's probably worth talking about that. So,
I mean, we don't really have a choice. I mean, we'll get into why we don't think we have a choice later on, but like, I wanted to basically turn the podcast into pure, like, mental health propaganda to try and keep people happy and keep people up and just, like, bin the news entirely and just focus on getting awesome people on the pod as much as possible and having a laugh. But the bigots and the bastards just haven't stopped, and we need to talk about these things. So starting off with some truly terrible news. Hungarian Prime Minister and far-right goon Viktor Orban has been handed total power in Hungary to rule by decree indefinitely by the Hungarian parliament due to the global pandemic you may have heard far, far too much about at this point. What this means is that Orban is now essentially a dictator, and for the time being, democracy in Hungary is suspended. And what was one of Orban's first moves since he essentially became a dictator? To have his deputy Prime Minister Scholt Semyon introduce an act that would strip trans people of legal recognition. Because clearly that is the most important thing that needs to happen right now.
Good prioritising skills there, Orban.
I mean, Jesus fucking Christ. I don't even know what to say about this. Like, I was expecting some fucker to do this somewhere in the world. I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be Hungary. But anyway, to get a better read on things, we reached out to Yvette Udog, an organiser for Budapest's first Trans Pride last year, to tell us all about it. Hello, Yvette Udog. How are you doing today?
Wow, relative to the current situation in Hungary, pretty well. But yeah, so the last day was pretty harsh on me. I've been doing some soul searching.
I can imagine. What is the situation? What will this new act that is being introduced do if it does become law?
So what they did is they are going to introduce a new legal concept that is biological sex instead of gender. So until now, we had our gender on our personal identification cards. And now they want to introduce biological sex instead of that. And what that means is, of course, whoever already had their gender changed or whoever wants to change their gender, it becomes meaningless because all of the papers are going to contain The biological sex, which is defined as something unchangeable and is defined as something that has been observed at birth. And yeah, that obviously is a problem for trans people, because that would mean that we cannot have our legal gender changed anymore.
What about with people who already have legally changed their gender? Will it now revert? Will it now be stripping back?
Yeah, so we don't know yet. So based on the word of the law, that's what it implies. We don't know if they actually want to go through with that, but it pretty much sounds like it. And the law is actually containing things that are biologically and medically incorrect. So it says that this biological sex is defined as whatever the doctor observes as a primary sex characteristic and the chromosomal sex of that person, which might not be the same. We all know that there are intersex people, and for them it might happen that they have a genitalia that looks like a female genitalia but have XY chromosomes, and vice versa. So the law itself is a good example of the Dunning-Kruger effect, when someone knows a little about the topic and then thinks they know everything. It's not even correct in scientific terms.
And one of the side effects of this could be severe problems for intersex people, of which there is something like 3% of the population have some kind of intersex condition in some way. Mm-hmm. Far, far more than there are trans people. According to the UK government Office of National Statistics, about 0.6% of the population are trans.
Yep.
And like 3% of people are intersex. Like, this sounds like it's going to have a major impact on the intersex community in Hungary, even though they're not being thought about.
Yeah, I mean, in general, even just 1 or 2 decades ago, it was normal in Hungary to operate on intersex kids right after birth without the consent of the parents.
Wow.
And that actually happened to some of our friends in the trans community, who are only trans because they have been operated on. Otherwise, they would just be intersex.
What is the next steps for this introduced act to become law? What is the situation there? Because the phrase that has been bandied around in the media has been ruled by decree indefinitely.
Yeah.
Which essentially means, as I understand it,
the thing about ruled by decree is that if and whenever they decide to stop the crisis situation and say that they want to go back to, again, talk things through in the parliament, if that would happen, then all of the decisions that were made as part of the rule by decree, those will be reverted. So they still have parliament in place and they still vote on things. It's just that whenever they decide that they want to move forward with something, immediately they can circumvent that for the time being, and as far as we know, indefinitely. At the same time, since they have 2/3 majority, they actually vote on these things still, whatever is not that urgent. And that's what is happening with this law. It's going to be voted on within a few days. But since they have the majority, it's probably going to go through.
Yeah, and I guess the pandemic has limited the amount of activism you can do in response, and I guess they were counting on that.
Yeah, they obviously count on that. We cannot do another Pride March right now. We actually had to cancel our second Budapest Trans Pride, which was to be organized the weekend before Trans Day of Visibility, which was actually just 2 days ago, right on the day when this bill was introduced.
Yeah, the timing of it was particularly fucking galling.
Yeah, it was. That's it's like they wanted to make it even more hurtful.
Obviously, we are all in the same position when it comes to being stuck in the house, unable to gather in large ways. But is there anything that the listeners can do from the safety of their own home to try and make people more aware, or to try and maybe help people on the ground in Hungary as this is going on?
Yeah, so number one, get the word out. If you can post on social media, talk about this, let the entire Europe know what's going on in Hungary. We need European leaders to step up and say that this shouldn't go on any longer, and Hungary has to change their attitude. The other thing is we have a Europe-wide petition that is about this law and also about the rule by decree situation. And just by signing that and asking EU representatives to step up and take action against the current Hungarian government, I think that's the most we can do right now.
And we'll provide all of the links to help you, listener, do all that in the reference sheet, as we usually do. Yvette, I don't know what to say, really. This is... it must be a particularly scary time.
It definitely is. Yeah, it's about time that we do something. And, you know, the really annoying part is that you can't even get away from this easily, because within the EU, if you have a problem with one government, you move to another country and you are good in most situations. But not this one, because for legal gender change, you have to be a citizen of that country. So that means that even within the EU, you would have to move to a different country, live there for about 5 to 6 years, and then you can apply for citizenship. And after that, you can apply for legal gender change. This is madness. Basically, we are in a situation where we cannot get out of this, even if we move to another country.
Yvette, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So the situation is pretty bad, but there are things you can do to help. Go down to the links in the description and sign the petition Yvette mentioned. But also write to your MP. Obviously, they are going to be busy and stuck at home, but this is too important, and you can act on this from the safety of your home, so you should go and do it. There'll be a link in the description on how to find your MP and how to get in contact with them. Try to get them on the phone if you can, because that means more than an email. And don't try to write a letter, because it's not safe outside. Try and get them on the phone if you can. Tell them to raise the alarm about Hungary's democracy being suspended, and share as much of the stuff listed in our links on your social medias as best you can. Get the word out. Also, Yvette asked us to help her get her CV out there as she looks to be leaving Hungary at the first opportunity. If you are in the programming community and can help her find a job in Germany, which is where she would like to end up, please do check out her CV on the link sheet and get in touch with her on the Twitter, which will be linked, or message us and we will get you in contact with her. Please help any way you can. Hungarian trans and intersex people need your help.
You want to be able to say, oh gosh, it's astonishing that they would do this at the time of a global pandemic, but it actually kind of isn't. It's not astonishing at all. It's precisely doing a lot of stuff that bigots like this feel that they are justified in doing, even when there's lots of other panic on. Essentially, it's like, you could be dealing with stuff about access to healthcare, making sure too many people aren't going to be exposed to the virus. You could be doing all sorts of things in terms of research and testing and yada yada yada. But no, we're not going to do that. Mr. Prime Minister, tell the civil service that what we're really going to do as a priority is bully the trans community some more. Fantastic news, wonderful, and my heart goes out to you if you're in Hungary. It's ugh. But because Hungary is technically part of the EU, so there's a whole thing about how membership states of the EU are not supposed to be dictatorships. But what would that blowback be? What exactly are the EU going to do about that? Remains to be seen, because, as mentioned once or twice before, there is a bit of a crisis on. So things get allowed to slide. Things said, oh, well, we'll deal with that after the crisis is over. And by that point, it's too late. The affected population is already dispersed in some way. So, yeah, it's pretty sickening stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, so wherever you are, be on the lookout for, essentially, fascist virus creep, I guess, is a way to describe it, where, bad people are trying to take advantage of the situation to do terrible shit.
Hmm.
I don't believe that's necessarily the case in the UK. For all that racist liar and Prime Minister Boris Johnson is, and if you know us, you know that we do not mince our words when we talk about that fucking pig-faced fuck. But the man does have one thing he believes in, and that is personal liberty. That is the one thing that he has actually stuck to his guns on throughout his entire life, and that usually translates to freedom for the free market to be as terrible as they want to be. But it
Yes.
also goes both ways. I don't think we necessarily have this to worry about, but we will be looking at that from the UK perspective. And we urge you, wherever you are, to do the same, even if it doesn't look like it's a possibility, because it always is. Even I could be very wrong about Boris Johnson, and I'm sure many of you will tell me so if you believe that is the case, and please do on Twitter at WhatTheTrans. And I'm always willing to hear a diversity of opinion. But anyway, I'm just going to waffle on about fascists now for a bit, and that's probably not worth it for anyone at the moment, considering we've got enough to worry about with everything else that's going on. So should we move on to the other final bit of terrible news?
Yes, we will. But I mean, in fairness, these two bits of news are kind of linked by a theme, aren't they? It's like people who really should have better things to do deciding that what they really want to do is bully the trans community. So, obviously, as we've mentioned, we really didn't want to do a terrible news this week, or indeed any week, whilst we're in an international crisis, the likes of which we haven't seen in the best part of a century. But the Terfs, they've not fucking stopped, and oh my gods, listeners, Jesus. Obviously, they are still out there and still need to be resisted, and scary things are still being reported by a transphobic press, and we have to go through all that and debunk stuff instead of focusing on creating content to uplift and entertain and distract you while you're stuck at home. Let's just get through this quickly so we can get on to the nice stuff later on. So, the Mail on Sunday is, I'm sorry to say, still open and operating, as it turns out you can operate one of the worst newspapers on the planet remotely from the comfort of your own home. But instead of maybe asking the UK government why they didn't act on COVID-19 3 months ago, when they first knew about it, or why they ignored the World Health Organization's recommendations for the best part of a month, they instead chose to send journalists after mermaids for having an escape button on their website. Now, an escape button is an extremely common thing that you find on LGBT websites. Stonewall and LGBT Foundation use them as well, so people that are accessing that information can very quickly navigate away if they're in an unsafe environment to do so. The escape button was placed there by mermaids so that any kid who is unsupportive people around them during the lockdown, and at any other time in fact, could still access the site, but then could quickly navigate away if anybody starts looking over their shoulder. So this is basically a link to Wikipedia, slightly glorified, but this caused an absolute uproar from the Mumsnet Stormfront Prosecco clan, despite the fact that Childline also has the same feature, as well as every domestic violence charity in the world. And it was this uproar that the report used to justify the fact that it had been written in the first place. So this is a really typical trick within the UK press, and evidence once again that transphobes and bigots have got a direct line to the UK media even during a goddamn global pandemic, because their response to anything remotely trans-related is guaranteed to get lots of coverage while trans people themselves barely get a look in. But the story that caused more anxiety in the community was the one that was printed alongside this anti-Wikipedia hyperlink horseshit. Also, according to the Mail on Sunday, the Equalities Minister has come out and said that trans women, referred to as male-bodied in the piece, because sure, why the fuck not, should be barred from women's facilities. But, as per usual with the anti-trans press, the actual details of this are far less worrying than the headline would initially make it appear. So, according to the fucking Mail, quote-unquote women's minister, Baroness Berridge, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords, who is also a former director of the Conservative Christian Fellowship, stated that transgender people can be excluded from single-sex facilities if service providers have a legitimate reason for doing so and if exclusion is the least discriminatory way to proceed. You might have heard this rephrased as a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim. And to our listeners who can remember our episode on the Equality Act with Tara Hudson, this is just a description of what the Equality Act says. The statement doesn't say anything about barring trans women from women's facilities, but the Mail on Sunday has never let facts get in the way before, so why should they start bothering now, right? So also in that same report, it's claimed from, as ever, an unnamed source that female ministers are fighting male aides over this issue and that Liz Truss, who is the current Minister for Women and Equalities, wants to be much tougher over taking away trans people's rights. But beanie-wearing Brexit bastard Dominic Cummings, who is racist liar and Prime Minister Boris Johnson's chief advisor, just wants the whole issue to go away as he doesn't believe it to be a particularly high priority for voters, which is more or less the only time I will ever agree with an assessment by Dominic Cummings. It's also worth noting how Baroness Berridge was labelled an equalities minister, which is technically true, but she is not a minister for the Government Equalities Office like Liz Truss is. She's the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State, and then in brackets, Minister for Women, at the Department for International Trade. So the truth of the story is that a trade minister outlined almost word for word the single-sex facility exemptions in an Act of Parliament, so that's not quite as sexy as the Mail on Sunday's version of it, though, is it? Now, something else in transphobic news that we kind of didn't really want to cover again, but we have to. The LGB Alliance, those cheeky scamps, have applied for a charity status. The LGB Alliance, for the people who might not be aware of this, is an anti-trans hate group masquerading as an LGB rights group, but literally all they have done so far, with the thousands that they have raised via crowdfunding, is to take out a bunch of anti-trans adverts in various local and national newspapers while also having a Twitter account. We put together a quick list of issues that are currently affecting LGB people that they haven't done anything about. So PrEP access on the NHS, which thankfully came along and happened anyway, tackling the rising number of hate crimes targeting the LGB community. They haven't done anything at all on how COVID-19 is threatening and frightening the LGB community. They haven't been taking on the homophobes fighting LGB inclusion in schools. In fact, one of their senior members actually came out against the idea of LGB inclusive clubs at schools. Or indeed, they haven't done any work on any other issue facing lesbians, gay men, and bisexual people. However, if you tell them this, like a lot of people have, they will then argue that trans ideology is inherently homophobic and is absolutely, definitely the biggest issue facing LGB people today, instead of literally all of the other stuff that I've just mentioned. So this lot have applied for charity status. Now, to qualify as a charity in the UK, according to the Charities Act of 2011, the organisation must be exclusively charitable, they cannot have a mix of charitable and non-charitable purposes, and they must be working for a public good. Now, seeing that the LGB Alliance fail on every single metric there, we believe that the Charity Commission will see through their clear attempt to dodge paying taxes on their dubious crowd-funded bellendery. But there is a petition that has, at the time of recording, has over 16,000 signatures already to try and stop LGB Alliance from gaining the charity status. The petition will be sent to the Charities Commission themselves. We've put a link to this in the description so you can sign it yourself and make the message even clearer just in case. I know we've already done this. We'd encourage you to do the same. And that is the UK Terfs Give It a Rest for Fuck's Sake news roundup.
I know, right? I mean, to start with the LGB Alliance stuff, it's just so blatant what they're doing. They're looking for legitimacy, right? And they're looking to dodge paying taxes on their main source of funding, which is through crowdfunders, which are registered as taxable income in most cases. And I think it's safe to say that the LGB Alliance are basically trying to find a way to sidestep having to pay the government some of their money.
Yeah, I mean, they could also be trying to apply for charitable status, not just so they can hold on to their ill-gotten gains, but because they might consider that it gives them a degree of legitimacy. They might think, well, look, we're an actual charity. Clearly the government believe in what we do. Look, you should support us. You should punch every single trans person in the face, because I'm guessing that's what's coming next. So, yes, it's slightly annoying. The ministers thing is also, we've kind of done this, and again, we are kind of covering what an anti-trans right-wing tabloid is saying. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's any point us doing that, but this rhetoric is out there. Other people are reading it and being affected by it. But as ever, the truth is nowhere near as sensationalist and straightforward as people like the Mail and the Times like to think that it is. Or indeed like to write that it is. I'm sure they don't actually think half of what they're writing is true, because clearly it isn't, but that doesn't seem to matter. Yay, capitalism!
Yay, indeed. Like, I would have loved to have just not covered anything like this week, or in fact, until maybe COVID is done.
Or maybe forever. That'd be good.
Or forever would be preferable, obviously, but I saw a lot of people online freaking the fuck out, and rightly so, at the idea that there is a equalities minister looking to strip rights away, but that isn't the case. And even if it was, who's going to do that now? Like, the government at this point, if they quietly killed off GRA reform, allegedly according to a report in The Independent. But it remains to be seen whether they did that because there was the perfect excuse to, or whether it was cutting all of the legislative agenda that's coming up because we're dealing with an international crisis. But either way, we aren't really in a position to fight this now, even if it is true. And I don't necessarily believe it is for the reasons that you pointed out, Ash. Like, it's very vague. It feels like the Mail were trying to spin this into something just to fill space and to keep up the anti-trans narrative they've established more than anything else. And the other stuff they published in that issue of the Mail on Sunday, like they published a story where racist liar Boris Johnson came down with the virus himself, but they tried to pin it on an EU negotiator instead of that he met a month ago, instead of the fact that he was claiming to be shaking hands with people with the virus like a week before. And you can see they're just trying to pin it on, they're trying to pin like COVID in some way on the EU, but they're also trying to pin it on China because they had this horrible racist article about like Chinese markets. And Ian Duncan Smith wrote this horrible screed where he was blaming China for the current situation around the world. And that's clearly them trying to deflect on the blame of their handling of this onto China. Like, it's so fucking transparent what they're doing. And Ian Duncan Smith isn't in the cabinet. He's not connected with the government. He is just an MP. However, he was a chairman of Boris Johnson's leadership campaign. So clearly...
Yep. That mindset, that thought process it's in the halls of power, right? And that's not a good place for it to be.
Also, the thing is that if China take offence to Ian Duncan Smith's editorial, the government have plausible deniability because he is not in government. But because he has such close ties to Boris Johnson and worked so hard to make him leader, I mean, this is me thinking out loud. There's no way of knowing this is true, but I could totally see that Boris Johnson asked him to do it. So eventually, when there's an inquiry, and there will be an inquiry into the government's handling of this happens, the public will be too busy blaming China or blaming the EU or any number of things.
Yeah. No, I agree. And they do a similar thing in America. There was either a UN or World Health Organization working group that kind of was trying to develop a cohesive international response, which fell apart because the delegates from the US insisted on referring to it in all of their documentation and pushing for like an actual public name change from COVID-19 to the Wuhan virus. Right? And so China are immediately like, no. And, this international response committee literally fell apart because the US were extremely intractable on, making sure that the right name was on it, which they did in the last pandemic as well. It was called Spanish flu, but it was first identified and isolated on an army base in Kentucky. So that pandemic should have been the Kentuckian flu, but the Americans weren't so keen on going with that. So
yeah, I wonder why.
Crazy, right? Almost as if there's been some deflecting for a long time. Anyway, I think we should move on to the cheerful stuff, which means, dear listener, I am going to take my leave because, as has been mentioned, I am unwell and I am not able to do the rest of this episode. However, I leave you in the capable and delightfully warm hands of Michelle, who will direct you through the delightful remainder of the episode. So, ta-ta for now.
Yeah, rest up, Ash. I'm serious.
I will. I'm gonna
lie down, eat chocolate, squeeze your girlfriend, do all of the lovely things.
I am largely unable to do anything else today. It's rubbish. I know it's a bit stuck. We're all being stuck in our house, but I'm kind of stuck in one room because I can barely walk. So that's lovely. Anyway, speak to you all soon, and yes, ta-ta.
So now Ashley has gone to bed. We've come to the meat, and the shock of our new world situation has subsided somewhat and has been replaced with something I don't think anyone expected from the apocalypse. Sort of swinging between horrific existential dread and total utter boredom and living in our pajamas. Obviously, that's how I used to live anyway before this, thanks to a variety of mental health issues, but now it's very, very strange to see how everybody else is catching up with my lifestyle. But anyway, for the meat this week, we thought, fuck it, let's get weird with this shit and come up with some ways to fill out our days that you won't see in the endless stream of articles about what you should be doing right now while stuck in the house. To help me figure out how to fill my days, we have joining us on the show comedian and creator, writer and star of Comedy Central's Transaction, Jordan Gray. Hello, Jordan.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for having me. You say you're in your pyjamas.
Oh yeah, I haven't been out of pyjamas since this thing started.
I'd consider that a luxury in and of itself. I'm just sitting here absolutely nude. Number one on the list of ways to entertain yourself. I find I catch myself in the mirror a lot more than I normally do. I've noticed a lot more reflective surfaces in and around my household.
I know what you mean. Like, when your brain isn't necessarily being as occupied as it once was in the before times. certain like, is that a dysphoria thing with you? Because it very much is for me when I suddenly realise, oh, I look like that. Oh, no. Oh, God.
I think just as a normal state of sitting down hunched over a laptop, I've developed sort of a paunch, like a survival pouch. I think all mammals have got them, but I know where it's come from. So it's less dysphoria and more, well, that's happened. That's science and I'll live by that. I just mean in like spoons and taps and stuff. I keep seeing myself around. Like, I didn't know that I was there before, but I've been looking at myself so often. Yeah, just here. I am with my wife as well, but I still spend more time looking at myself. That probably says something about me, doesn't it?
Well, it's all about just trying to do something to fill your day, but also putting aside, like, things like that could necessarily become a problem down the road. You know what I mean? Like, I find myself sort of thinking down the line of, oh, well, there's an international global pandemic, and it's going to get worse.
Probably, yeah.
But then I'm also like, you know, I need my roots doing. I need to get my roots done.
I have, on a number of occasions, I mean, as a stand-up comedian, as you understand, all of our work, our live work has disappeared. So we are corresponding a lot more on Skype, etc. And I'd never noticed before that, because I'm ginger, but I have never let on to that fact. I just dye my hair really regularly. Without this regular schedule, I've forgotten to do it, and a couple of times it's just popped up on screen like a fire, like a virus emerged in other people's houses. Yeah, so I basically have reminded myself I'm a ginger person, and you know, I'm sticking by it now.
Well, there'll be no gingerphobia here. Like, that is something that always seemed really strange to me. Like, why?
Yeah.
Why is that a thing? I don't understand.
I joined a death metal band when I was 14, and there was no other recourse than having black hair. I couldn't have a big ginger afro, but that was the only reason. Now, if I'd left it, I got really long curly hair now. I'd look like Julia Roberts in my best friend's wedding. So I might recede. I might go back to the good old days.
Have you seen what cis guys are doing on Twitter and stuff? Like, they've all started shaving their heads and like growing moustaches. I guess because they're like in week 2 of lockdown. And they're losing it. They're losing it.
It's like I love it when you see people who their heads look like they're upside down. They grow massive beards and shave the top. It looks like they're just flipped upside down.
Yeah, the second lockdown's over, you're going to go out and suddenly see all these guys who've decided, right, this is my chance to be bald with a massive beard.
Yeah,
like, it's
I
just
don't know
be...
what that offers as an advantage. What is that good for?
I don't know. Maybe they all really want to look like Walter White, which is the wrong lesson to take from Breaking Bad, I feel. But, you know, all power to them. But it's just strange for me to see all these people adopting my lifestyle. Because I haven't really done, like, the full-time work thing in a couple of years. I was going to get that way because I was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, figured out that was kind of the root of most of my problems. So got on the meds, started to feel better, and was going to go out and get some work. But then, you know, COVID happened. But here's the thing, because I've been living sort of in lockdown conditions because I've not had much money. So I've basically sort of been stuck at home, only really able to go to Tesco anyway and living in my pajamas for a lot of the time. And it's not been the worst. Like, I've been sick, but it's not been the worst. And now I'm seeing cis people, mostly entirely cis people, going, this is unbearable. I'm stuck eating pasta and doing nothing with my day. And I'm like, my lifestyle isn't that bad. I'm taking it quite personally. Have you had that?
Yeah, we've had to sort of potentially a lot of transgender people have lived in the shadows, as it were, for a long time. We've been self-isolating so as not to cause any additional conflict or confusion in our lives or anyone else's. Yeah, and now other people complaining about that. I don't think you'd hear about Italians complaining as much about the pasta thing. I suspect that's just part of daily life. But I get what you mean. I understand the general idea. I'm living off like wagon wheels and things like that. A lot of round child chocolate snacks. That's been my diet of late.
Oh, that is a good genre of food. That is the.
I got worried about them for a while. This is so niche, right? But I don't know why other people didn't get worried about it. Do you remember when they changed the pound coin like a couple of years ago? It used to be completely round, and then they made it. It's like a ninja star, isn't it? It's now got corners. What
Yeah.
They literally cut corners off the pound because it's the same. This is so niche. It's the same circumference, but they use less material, and I think that sets a really dangerous precedent. I don't want to wake up to like an octagonal wagon wheel one day. They're taking away all the circular stuff, so I'm just getting it in while the getting's good.
Right, that's next episode. We're going to do a massive expose on the future of round childish treats.
Yeah, just don't be surprised if you wake up and find your baby bells turned into a Dairy Lee triangle.
Oh God.
Doesn't bear thinking about, Michelle.
The effects of this pandemic will be felt for decades to come in the most horrible ways.
In children's lunch boxes up and down the nation.
So you're a working comedian, you've been doing the gigs and stuff. Now the gigs aren't necessarily happening anymore. Are you finding ways to ply your trade as a comedian without access to a live audience?
It's a very, very good question. It's literally all any of us are thinking about in the arts. Here's the thing, Michelle. Right, so a couple of weeks ago when we went into lockdown, I don't know when it was, 10 days or so, the prevailing sentiment was, now is the time to do the thing you never thought you would do or the thing you've been putting off. Why not write that play you were talking about or write that book? Then, almost exactly 1 week later, I'd logged on to discover that sentiment has completely changed. And all I get are articles like, don't fall prey to this idea that you have to do that thing you've never done. Take this time to reflect and relax. I suspect, Michelle, that's just all the people that tried to do something that they'd never done. They realised it was quite hard and then they gave up after a week. So I'm not doing that. I started writing a book. I have my Edinburgh Fringe show. Of course, most comedians, you spend your year working on an hour and you take that hour to Edinburgh Fringe. I've had to convert that into another medium. So I'm attempting to change it into a book, but to retain all the nuance, of what it would be if it was a performance. It's a book about superheroes.
Oh, well, people who listen to the show a lot know that I have a particular obsession with superheroes, particularly the ones with broad shoulders. I have a thing for shoulders. Is that weird?
Not at all. It demonstrates physical prowess, doesn't it? It's like a triangle. Men that are shaped like triangles, men and women, they've got better balance, haven't they, than the rest of us? If they've got thick at the top, it means their centre of gravity is different, so they could probably kick ass.
You've nailed it. You've nailed exactly why I find it so hot. I do love balance in any man.
I think what we've discovered today is that geometry is very, very important, whether it's in somebody's sexual preferences or indeed the snacks that we like to enjoy.
I didn't expect the conversation to go here, but I'm glad that we found some gold.
We've hit a common ground, I think. In these divided times, people need to take shapes a bit more seriously. I love superheroes, Michelle. What is your favourite superhero?
It's probably, and this is going to sound strange because I'm not particularly fond of the country he is named after, but probably Captain America, only because he seems like the more modest, and also he's the kind of person who wouldn't be shitty to somebody serving him food. And that is the hottest thing.
That's what he doesn't share with his American cousins. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and obviously he will stand up against America when they're wrong in the comics and stuff like that. But all the way through, he's just really nice.
He is nice.
What about you?
I think, to add to that, I like Captain America. I think they could have got it very wrong, and they could have been sort of a goody two-shoes, sort of, teacher's pet type guy. But he's not, is he? At one point, he's a lone wolf, isn't he? He's sort of a criminal of America. But he holds on to that notion, that the little guy can prevail. I like Marvel better than DC. Basically, the book I've written, it was a show I was going to take called X-Man, where I'm essentially explaining why I might be the next stage of human evolution as a transgender person.
Oh, that sounds so good.
I love it. I'm getting so into it. I don't have any actual superpowers, but as transgender people, we've got a lot of technical superpowers. We are all shapeshifters by definition. But Batman has got no powers whatsoever, and everyone thinks he's brilliant. I spend most of the book throwing Batman under the bus, as it were, explaining why I'm better. Don't like DC. I think they're up themselves. I like Spider-Man because he's the underdog, the under spider.
Yeah, I really like Spider-Man. Although I would like it if the movies moved on from his youth, because in the comics he's 40, right? And he's died a couple of times, I think. He's had a family. I think he got divorced at one point. I don't know. The universe keeps changing.
That's a really good point. We hold on to that when he got bitten, when he was in school, because that's Mary Jane, isn't it? And the girl next door. The girl next door at 40, it doesn't seem like quite as... seems a little bit sinister, if anything. So, yeah, I understand what you mean. I guess it's like Bart Simpson. How old's he now? 70?
I guess because the movies are trying to appeal to a younger audience, so if they had a 40-year-old divorced Peter Parker, like they did in that animated one...
Oh, yeah, Into the Spider-Verse. I like that.
Yeah, I did, because it finally had, the sad schleb Peter Parker that I really identified with.
Yeah, we need to... I mean, back in the day, of course, all we had was Superman and the original Captain Marvel, Shazam. And essentially, they couldn't do anything wrong. They were just perfect. I don't... okay, so how do you feel about this? This is how I felt about Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel. So DC and Marvel, they released their first ever female-led solo movies. And they were great, of course, but I don't particularly identify with an Amazonian princess from another time, another world. I liked Captain Marvel because she could be a bit of a dickhead, and that I relate to that in a very strong way. So I cried a couple of times in Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed Captain Marvel, and I think you're right. I haven't actually seen the Wonder Woman one yet, just because the DC Universe films were so garbage. I didn't expect it to be good.
They were very difficult to watch. It was good though. I mean, of that lot, it's the best of a bad lot. It's just that, so as a transgender person, it's very difficult for me to affiliate and associate with a lot of my female friends, because I don't share that mentality of let's all hang out together and keep the tribe happy and share interesting tidbits and gossip and stuff. I just didn't have that in me. And then I saw Captain Marvel. I was like, oh, of course a woman can be a lone wolf. Why is it taking me this long to realise that you can still go out on your own as a female? And it's just something that's ingrained, especially when you watch superhero movies from a very young age. So I loved it. And Wonder Woman's she's just a lot better than me, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's a thing in the DC universe where they found a way to tell a compelling story about essentially godlike people, but they got kind of pompous with it.
Yeah.
It's all about what is the ethical consequences of a man who could set people on fire with his eyes, and it's well, that's fine, but I can't
relate.
Yeah, and also they kind of covered that in the Greek myths and stuff. Give me Captain America and Peter Parker just hanging out, talking shit and comparing stories from being a teen in the 40s and a teen today, and then have the Green Goblin show up and they punch him a bit. There we go, job done.
That's so true and so poignant. In our I don't know what the word is, secular society, it's an ever increasing atheistic society, we've had to replace the hero myth with these superhero niches, haven't we? We don't believe in gods and that anymore, particularly the Roman Greek pantheons of gods. So we've got Batman and Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel. And if I may be so bold, I think if you're looking for a hero, listeners, I'm quite happy to throw my hat into that ring. I am literally an X-Man. And I'll provide that service for you. I mean, us comedians are diversifying. If anyone's interested, I'll be the saviour of humankind. I've got loads of powers. It's all in the book. Got loads of superpowers.
Ah, that's amazing. So to kind of bring it back round to the original premise, basically, listeners, if you're sat at home, try to figure out how you are some kind of superhero. Or failing that, just, make a comic about Jordan.
That is a really, really good point. I didn't think about that. If you are bored at home, look into what you do best and accentuate that as best you can. Grab a bit of lycra and go out into the world and start solving crimes. What, Michelle, would you say, do you have any specific skills where you think, like, in your head, you're like, I can do that better than almost anybody and no one gives me credit for it? For example, I'm really good at finding things. If my wife loses something, it's like a sixth sense. I know where it is. It's usually just because she's sitting on it, but I'll find it and give it to her. And I in my head, every time I go, nobody else could have done that. I'm actually a superhero.
Sounds like I need that, because I think my superpower is the ability to lose things.
We would make a confusing partnership.
Yeah, I'd be the sidekick that gets you into lots of trouble by losing the keys to a nuclear weapon or something, and then that would be when you shine. Or would I be the villain? Would I? Because the villain usually has the opposite power, so maybe I would be the supervillain to your hero.
Yeah, we would be a redundant partnership, but as two conflicting forces of nature, I think we'd put on a pretty good show. Well, do you have aspirations in one way or the other, villain or hero? I played a villain this January in an adult pantomime. I played the evil Queen Quim in in a production of Blow White instead of Snow White. It was really fun, but nothing prepares you for walking out in the first 10 seconds and just getting booed by everyone. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me. Not that hasn't happened before.
In my limited stand-up comedy career, I think I'm lucky in this respect, because I had one bad gig. Like, they say everyone bombs a lot when they're first starting. That didn't happen for me. I had one bomb. And at that point, I was like, I have to be the hero. If I was to be a professional wrestler, I couldn't live with that kind of response every time I came out in public. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, especially your style of comedy, like, I know for me, I play like a high status character. I think I'm better than everybody else, and the humor comes from me getting stuff wrong. So if people are booing me on the way out, then like anyone in their right mind would recognize that booing as a course correction. It's like, stop doing what you're doing and doing something else. But my humor all just comes from following through on my terrible ideas. It's a wonderful thing. I think comedy in and of itself is a bit of a superpower. I think we could certainly, at this time, it's saving people, isn't it, around the world, just being able to tune in and listen to something funny. So thank you, as a diligent broadcaster, Michelle, for getting this out into the world. I think it's really important.
Well, thanks. I've never been called a diligent broadcaster before. I don't keep it secret that I'm recording this in my pajamas in my bedroom using technology that was bought for me by the listeners from Amazon.
That's really nice. Yeah, so it's a socialist experiment. I like it.
It really is. Like, this whole thing, like, I mean, the basic premise of this whole thing is we'll never make any money because our target audience is like 0.6% of the population. We don't aim anything we do at cis people in any way, mostly because when I was coming up with all this stuff, what the podcast is going to be, I was like, I'm never going to change anyone's mind. I'll just get too angry at them. Like, if the trans community was looking for someone to, do outreach into the cis community, that's not me.
That's so interesting. Like, I was going to ask, for clarity, that 0.6, was it 0.6% or 0.06%?
0.6% according to statistics from the Office of National Statistics, but it should be said that is a very educated guess, but It is a guess nonetheless.
And that is, of course, just to catch me up, that's the percentage of transgender people in the population that you're potentially reaching out to with this program. So as what I do, I'm not surrounded by a great deal of transgender people. The ones that I meet, we're all in media, like say such as yourself, who connect because of this medium. I'm performing to 100% cisgender people, and people of varying age groups, etc. That's my niche. I feel like I'm good at communicating across that barrier. And then it's always a really wonderful thing to suddenly be surrounded by all transgender people where I don't need to explain terms and ideas and things, and you can just get right to the crux of the issue. But in terms of comedy, that's very niche. I can't just walk out in front of a particular Friday night audience and talk about that little line that starts to develop between your testicles and your anus. I don't know if you're aware of this, but like you develop this little line, and I found out it's the blueprints. It's like nature's blueprints for a vagina, because I take a lot of estrogen. And you develop this really dark line, so you look like a factory-made dolly. I can't just go and talk about that on a Friday night because nobody would know what the hell I'm talking about.
All right, trans women who happen to be listening, another thing you can do to break the boredom, go grab a mirror and go have a look for this line, because I know that's the first thing I'm going to do after we're done here, because I didn't know that was a thing, and it's not like an area that I've really explored on my own body.
No, exactly. It's prime real estate, if anything, and you find it's quite. I find it quite aesthetic. I think it's really sweet. It does look like two halves of a dolly have been molded together, but yeah, it's nature's blueprint for a vagina. So it starts to form those. It's difficult to explain. Just look for it. Just get a mirror, as you say. If you can't find a mirror, there's nobody outside, so you just go out to the nearest car and see if you can tiptoe up against the wing mirror. Nobody will see. No one's outside, and it'll be a laugh. We're all in this together, aren't we?
Yeah, that's definitely something to suggest to an audience during a global pandemic. Go outside and start exposing your taint.
You can imagine the rumours straight away. Daily Mail, COVID spread by transgender taints, on contact with wing mirrors. Make sure you always tuck your wing mirrors in of a night time. We are, of course, immune. That's another thing that transgender people should know. We are immune, and our secretions actually contain the antivirus. So
we are the cure. We are the cure to society's ills in more ways than one.
We really do, spiritually, taint-wise, just in every possible, both the main ways. That's the two main ways. We are saving the world, and I think we're revolutionary, and we deserve to pat ourselves on the back. And while you're there, have a little look, see what's going on.
So, as you are something of a divergent thinker as a comedian, and I know from my time doing the comedy stuff and talking to a lot of comedians think very differently from people who aren't. Where has your mind been taking you now that you have been stuck at home? Where is the weirdest place you found yourself psychologically?
That is such an interesting way of phrasing it, especially like a divergent thinker. You're absolutely right. When you start comedy, you try to find the funny in everything, everywhere you go. I spend quite a lot of my time at the moment trying to think up celebrity food pun names, like Quentin Cappuccino. I thought of this morning. There was nobody around for this, and it's not gonna ruffle any cages, but it is what I spend my. Catherine's eating scones. I quite like that one. I think that's really funny. Matthew McCanapé was the one that made it into my little show Transaction, which we might speak about at the end. But right now, this list is very important. Who else did I have? Bovril Levine. That's one of my favourites.
That's really
That's
good.
very British.
That's
Bovril
really good.
Levine. I stood trying to think those up this morning at the sink, and it's the most fun I've had since way before the virus.
It sounds like you are living your best life in lockdown.
Yeah, it's. I don't know where to take this information. I don't know who needs to hear it, but Samuel L. Jackson is a thing that I've thought of out of my brain, and you're welcome to it.
See, I can't do puns. I've never been able to do puns. It's just something in my brain that's missing that just won't let me do it. I can't find other words that sound like other words like everybody else seems to be able to. Like, do you have any tips on how to pun?
Well, I would say don't worry yourself. It's probably an evolutionary advantage to not be able to do puns, because how many times have you heard a pun and thought, oh, I'm going to kill that person now? That was awful. It's probably a good thing. But if you really, really want to, I think it's about relaxing your mind. It's less about meaning. It's not semantics, and it's all about sounds. So if something sounds a bit like something you've done, you don't have to worry about what those words mean. I don't even know what bovril is. But like, it sounded like it would fit. I know you eat it / drink it.
Yeah, it's meat. It's basically hot meat that you drink at Northern football matches. That's where I found it. That's where I grew up in the North, and the North is strange. The North is very strange. I don't think a lot of people in the South really understand how strange you can get up north.
Yeah, my father is from Leeds, and I very, very rarely will I ever go up there, but it is a different world for sure. Bit colder, I think. And there's an odd mix. It's like it can be friendlier until you say something stupid like, can I have a lager shandy? then it stops being friendly. So, yeah. Whereabouts, what about you? Where were you? Where did you hail from?
I was raised in North Yorkshire, just down the road from where Downton Abbey would be if it existed.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So within the county of Yorkshire, yes.
Yeah, like basically near Ripon, near Middlesbrough, sort of in between those two places. And I think where I grew up, it was basically where the people that worked the lands would live. if we were going to keep up with the
right.
Downton Abbey sort of comparison.
Yeah, I have to pretend that I understand. I'm afraid I've not seen it. I understand the premise. It's rich people and poor people getting along as best they can.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
fucking
is
hate
that's
it.
the show? Is that right?
I hate it so much because not everyone thinks that I come from a mansion whenever I say where I'm from. And also, I fucking hate that show because it just makes me so angry because I'm just like, no, you are just as good as them. Stop wiping their butts. Like-
It's important to say that second bit because we weren't sure if you meant the rich people or the poor people.
I think, yeah, I was putting too much trust in the listeners to have heard an episode before and know my views on this kind of thing. But I just hate it when, like, the servants and the maids and stuff are just like, well, this is my line and it is an honour to serve you. It's like, it's not a fucking honour. It is not the honour to basically do for these people what they should be able to do themselves.
The way the world is going, it may end up that we do develop this sort of draconian system once again. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think I could survive as a servant. I am very much, I'd love to think I'd be like a working class hero, but at the end of the world, after the apocalypse, I am definitely going to be that colourful weirdo that's presenting the Hunger Games. That's me in a nutshell. I will sell out and I'll be quite rich and famous, and there'll be a little part of me that wants to die.
So you'll probably be more like your character in your show, Transaction, rather than the person that you would want to be if you have put in that situation. And that was a very, very awkward way for me to segue talking about your show.
It's very kind of you to segue at all. That's very nice because, this is your program. You very kindly invited me on, and now we shall talk about my exploits. Transaction. Thank you very much for your kind words off air about that. It was really nice of you to say that. I've worked really hard on it, and I'm very pleased with how it's turned out.
I mean, I would love to say that I am mentioning it because I want to help your career, but honestly, it is more because it is so good that I want people to watch it when they're in lockdown. Like, I don't think it's going to necessarily be for everyone because the humor can be very, very extreme and explicit at times, so consider that as your content warning, listeners. But for the vast majority of people listening, I think that they will really, really dig it.
Thank
oh, God.
you.
I said dig it. Oh, my God.
No, commit to it. We're bringing it back.
That's right. That's right. I'm committing. You're going to dig this show. We're going to link to the playlist on YouTube where you can watch the whole series. It's called Transaction. It's hosted by Comedy Central.
Short form series. So there's only 6 short episodes. So you can enjoy the whole thing in about 30 to 40 minutes, something like that. Yeah, and, fingers crossed, more to come, hopefully.
Yeah, I fucking hope so too. So where did you get the idea to make a show like this? Because it's, to give people a sort of background, it's set in a supermarket, and I've done the supermarket job, and oh my God, it's one of the worst jobs I've ever had. It's like that and McDonald's. I don't have that thing.
It's manual and customer facing. So you've got the worst of both worlds. But this is set during the night shift. And we chose that specifically because things can get a bit weird overnight, can't they? Things can get a little bit psychedelic. You have too much coffee, you stay up too late, and conversations can take funny turns. And we just thought that's a really interesting space to explore. In my head, it's like a really low-key Mighty Boosh. Weird things will start to happen over the course of more and more series, fingers crossed. The ethos behind it was, of course, transgender people, we are just people. Some people are dickheads, ergo, some transgender people are just going to be dickheads as well. I play Liv, who is, she's very aware of her affirmative action hire, and she makes it everybody else's problem. She uses it to her advantage. And I loved this idea that they didn't hold back at all. They just let me write. They let me play this. She's not a villain. She is the hero, but she's also a bit of a dickhead.
Yeah, there is a thing in a lot of the media. I watched a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows with trans people in, just to see kind of what cis people in writers' rooms in America mostly think.
Yeah.
And either trans people are total saints, or a total victim, or a corpse.
Exactly. I'm applauding you right now. That's exactly. I basically wrote that on the internal memo when we first started all of this. She's not a suffering saint, and she's not a super sexualized villain or a drug mule or a dead person. Exactly. She's just someone in the middle that's doing her best. She's got a massive ego. When you are transgender, for a little while, certainly, when you come out, if you're surrounded by a supportive group of people, the world becomes all about you. It can't not. Everyone is talking about it, asking you questions. It's very easy for a delicate ego like Liv's to latch onto that. And then now everything in her life is fueled by the fact that she's transgender. So she works in a place where she got hired probably because of it, and she will never stop going on about it. And I love that. I love that they've let me do that. And if I can be so bold, I don't think it's been seen on TV before. She's sort of like a transgender super hands, if you've ever seen Peep Show, or like a Lady Russell Brand. That was a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a trans character portrayed like that before. Like, usually it's either entirely about them being trans, like you said, or Liv has got depth. Liv has got her own stuff going on that was going on before she transitioned, I assume, and is going to be happening long after.
Exactly, and she will learn lessons and she'll get her comeuppance. She's not just untouchable. Of course, there's going to be villains in her life that come in and out. Over the course of the series, you do get some lovely indications of where we would go if, fingers crossed, we're given a much larger space to do it in. But for now, the short form series is it's there for everyone to enjoy across Comedy Central UK's social media. It's Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. And I'm pretty sure we might have just tipped over 3 million views. It certainly was approaching that the last time I checked. So I'm over the moon. I could not be happier.
Well, you should go and add to those views, dear listeners out there. Somebody told me, like, a professional radio person told me that I shouldn't refer to people, like, in the plural when doing a podcast. And I just thought that was very, very strange. I don't know. I'm just getting into weird broadcasting theory now.
That's interesting, though. Yeah, I guess you want to feel like you're talking to that one person, and you know who you are, one person, but also... Isn't it nice that we're all in this together? I like that that somebody could... What if you've got voyeurs that are listening into this because they just like the sound of other people's voices and it gives them a sexual thrill? Maybe there's people that don't want to be acknowledged. So I think there's pros and cons. You do whatever you think is best, because I think this is a great show.
Oh, thank you very much. And I just wanted to say to anyone who does get off on the sounds of my voice, we are a very sex-positive podcast. I'm very glad you have found your particular fetish, if that is what you are comfortable with me referring to it as. But please don't tell me about it. Just please don't tweet at me about it. Like, it's fine. You can do it. Just, I never want to know.
And if you would like to get it off your chest, feel free to tweet me at Tall Dark Friend. That's actually the real... that sounds like I was making a joke. That is my social media, at Tall Dark Friend. And equally, I might not be able to help you necessarily, dear fetishistic listener, but I will be able to... At least you can get it off your chest. We can have a little chat.
Fair enough. And I think that's a wonderful final bit of advice for breaking the monotony of lockdown. Find your fetish wherever it may be. Maybe you're into balloons. Maybe you're into feet. Like, feet is a popular one.
Yeah. Well, feet balloons. Best of both. The best of both worlds.
Oh, that will exist, won't it? I used to kick around with someone who got paid like... Did I kind of pun? No, that wasn't...
You did.
I did. I punned by mistake.
That's it. It's gone in. The message has gone into your subconscious. You're going to be punning with the best of them, Michelle.
Thank you so much. But yeah, like, I was like hanging around with someone who used to get paid like £300 an hour to sit and smoke and be filmed smoking, because that was a whole thing. Like, she would have done it as a job because she smoked like a chimney anyway. But I just thought that was fascinating.
Otherwise known as French movie stars. Yeah, I don't know. I was just going to say something awful then. No, I don't have any professional aspirations in that sense. But there's plenty going on. Behind closed doors, as it were. But we've run out of time, so can't talk about it now. Michelle, you've been an absolute treat. I really hope that this show does for you what you want it to do for you. I'm sure it's reaching the right people, and please write into the show and say how good it was. And also, while you're on the internet, come and say hello to me at Tall Dark Friend. Yeah,
I was going to ask you if you have anything to plug, any socials to link. Is there anything else? You've got the book coming out. What's that? That's going to be called X-Man?
I do believe it's going to be called X-Man, or The Extraordinary Adventures of X-Man. I'm Jordan Gray. That'll be my book. The transaction is free to enjoy. And I just want you all to look after yourselves and each other. That was very Jerry Springfield. Jerry Springfield? What was his name?
Jerry Springer.
Jerry Springer. Look after yourselves and each other. Good night. Yeah. That was Jeff Goldblum.
I mean, it was good enough. I think that those kind of words are very much needed right now. Jordan, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show podcast thing that I keep doing.
Thank you for having me on your show podcast type thing. Please keep doing it, and I will hopefully speak to you again very soon.
Awesome. Oh, I really had fun doing that. I really did. But I think I should put here that, like, it's probably best if you don't actually attempt to do any of the things that we suggested you do. Obviously, we were messing around, so please don't put yourself in danger by tainting a stranger's car or any of the other things that came from that. But yeah, you should definitely check out Jordan's show. You can find that in the links in the description, and it is thoroughly good. I would highly recommend it for pretty much anyone, but a few little warnings up top. It's quite rude, it's quite silly, and it's very irreverent. Okay, I meant that as a warning, but it just sounds like I'm selling the thing, really. So yeah, if that's your bag, go check it out in the description. And yeah, I should probably try and work out how to end this show on my own, because I don't think I've ever tried to end a show on my own before. Let's see if I can do it. So, thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, you should check us out on social media, that thing that you do every day that ruins your day. You can get us on Twitter, /whatthetrans. You can get us on Facebook, /whatthetrans. We have a website, whatthetrans.com, that has all the information you'll ever need about who the fuck we think we are. We also have a Patreon, because of course we do. And basically I want to thank our patrons especially because due to their wonderful generosity, we now have a professional Zoom account, which means that we can do lots and lots of unlimited face chats and live streams and all sorts of stuff through our brand new Discord server. So we set this up because people are being stuck in the house, a lot of prides are being cancelled, a chance of being in a room full of people like you is very, very small over the next 12 months, I would say. So if you need some contact with community, you want to talk to some people about issues you are going through, if you are in an unsupportive environment, it is a place where you can escape. It is heavily moderated. I spend far too much time there myself and saying lots of very, very strange things that break any illusion of celebrity that somehow people have of me. It's an awesome place, so check out the link in the description. You'll have to fill in a form, and you'll need a Google account to do it. This is our way of checking to make sure that no bastards, brigands, and schools and scoundrels manage to find their way in. Thanks to the patrons, we now have a Zoom Pro account, so we can do lots and lots of more interactive things to keep talking to human faces, because I think mixing up the human faces that we talk to in times like this is very, very good for our collective mental health. But I would like to thank our patrons for making this happen. I'd like to thank Alexandra Lilly, Anthony Pena, April Heller, Becky Scott Farley, conduit of too many personas, Bernard's Pink Jellybean, Cassius Adair, Chris Hubley, Claire Scott, Elliot McVeigh, Ian Coomber, Karakan12, Catherine Laker, Lauren O'Nions, Lanos, Maddie Bell, Matt Reynolds, Melissa Brooks, Mike Dickinson, Mina, Molly, and Sophie Lewis. Thank you so much for your contributions. Also, I'd like to give a special shout out to Matt Reynolds, who helped me edit this show. They edited the last half of it, the conversation between me and Jordan, and I think they did a thoroughly smashing job. So if you liked what you heard, check them out on Twitter and Instagram at Chai Tiefling. Chai is in the T, I think, and Tiefling is in the Dungeons & Dragons species that I just discovered exists over the last week. Yeah, I think everyone at this point is being invited to D&D games right now, right? Is that something that's happening to you? Let me know. Come chat to me on the server, because I think that is a phenomena of this, that suddenly everyone is being invited into RPG tabletop role-playing games online. And you know what? I think that's a good thing. I think. I've not really played them before, but I'll let you know how that goes. Anyway, that's enough of me. But that's it from me. That's it from Ashley. If you could all send your love and support and healing vibes to Ashley as she recovers from her things and stuff in her room right now. I will see you next time for another episode of this thing that we're going to keep doing until somebody stops us. Have a wonderful week. Do as best you can. Wash your mitts. See you later. Bye-bye.